Welcome to Chapter 12, Social Emotional Development in Early Adulthood. In this chapter, we will look at four major topics: stability and change from childhood to adulthood, love and close relationships, adult lifestyles, and challenges in marriage, parenting, and divorce. There is a final fifth section that I will not be covering, but you should read it on your own. In this first video, we will deal with the first two major topics, beginning with stability and change from childhood to adulthood. And one overall common finding in research is that the smaller the time intervals over which we measure some kind of social emotional characteristic, let's say we're doing a study, let's say on measuring self-esteem at different ages. Uh, the smaller the time intervals, the more similar an individual will look from one measurement to the next. And this should make sense. I mean, uh, if I'm measuring self-esteem, you know, let's say every 25 years from 25 up to 75, I mean, I would take a measurement at 25, at 50, and at 75. And it may seem like, there are great changes, especially if I compare age 25 to age 75. I mean, it may look like self-esteem changes a lot, but if I was to do intervals of every 5 years and I looked at 25 to 30, 30 to 35, 35 to 40, etc., I mean, the change from one interval to the next is going to be much smaller, obviously. You're not going to change a lot from 25 to 30, your self-esteem levels, or from 30 to 35. So, I mean, this should make perfect sense. If we measure longer time period, there's more change. If we measure shorter time periods, there's less change in an individual. Um, Our adult attachment patterns. Okay, we've talked about attachment in regards to infants attaching to their mothers. We did this in an earlier section. And we can we can also speak about adult attachment patterns in adult relationships. And this has been a very interesting area of research in that they've been able to connect the two lines of research. I mean, there are those that study infant attachment patterns, and there are those that study adult attachment patterns. And it turns out that the adult attachment patterns with partners often reflect the childhood attachment patterns that they had with parents. So people that develop a secure relationship with their parent or parents early in life tend to have more secure adult relationships. Those that have more avoidant or anxious styles of attachment in early childhood tend to have more avoidant or anxious styles of attachment in their adult years. And so this is very interesting, just showing once again that there's a real connection between what 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 behaviors we engage in, and what experiences we have in early in life, and how they affect us throughout the lifespan. Um, so something that's happening initially in the first year of life, attaching to your mother, I mean, is going to have effects on you in your adult life and how you relate to others. I've talked a number of times about developing mental models, and I really like this topic. I like to come back to it. When we develop, a series of mental models throughout childhood. It's our first, our first conceptions of different topics like parenting and relationships and attachment, um, and and those models that we develop. I mean, they stay with us. They affect us as we become adolescents and adults. And this is one example. That first important relationship we have is kind of a blueprint. When I say mental models, it's like a blueprint. It's a blueprint for how we're going to experience relationships later. Um, If you were untrusting of your mother early in life, how do you expect to be trusting of you know partners in your adult life? And I said mother. I mean, let's say untrusting of your mother or your father early in life. You know, how can you expect to be trusting of of adults in an adult relationship when you're in that when you're trying to have intimate connections? I mean, one affects the other, and so anyways, getting back to adult attachment patterns, there are three major styles that get talked about, and these three same terms are used in infant attachment patterns: secure, avoidant, and anxious. Um, there is, if you remember, there was one called, there was also an infant attachment pattern called disoriented or disorganized. I mean, that one doesn't really copy and get reflected in adult relationships as much. So that one we don't really research in adult life. Remember that one? That was the one that was kind of based on fear because of some kind of neglect or abuse during childhood. I mean, I suppose it could be reflected in abusive adult relationships, but they don't really talk about that. So, anyways, let's go over these three styles real quick here. Secure attachment pattern. Um, those that have that kind of style have a positive view of relationships, find it easy to get close to others. They're not overly concerned or stressed about their romantic relationships. Um, their relationships tend to be based on trust. They talk about problems within the relationship, and they're people with a secure style are less likely to have one night stands. So so it's what we obviously what we say is a positive relationship. Those that have an avoidant attachment style are hesitant about getting involved in romantic relationships, and when they do get into them, they feel a need to distance themselves from their partner. Um, People with this style have less desire to be with others when they're alone compared to people with other styles. So they're fine being alone, is what I'm saying there. They don't feel a real need to always be with somebody else or to connect to others. So once again, so if I had to sum it up, I'd say those with an avoidant attachment style are very distant in relationships. Um, they're hesitant to get involved. When they do, they distance themselves. So somebody in this type of relationship, I mean, they will be that person that has their own space within the relationship, within the if they live together in a house, they will have kind of their office or their own space where it's really this is their space to go to, and they'll spend a lot of time there. So they're in the relationship, but they're not, but they're distant at the same time. Okay, and those finally with an anxious attachment style, they demand closeness, they're less trusting, more emotional, jealous, and possessive. Um, they're more likely to be characterized by a higher negative affect, meaning that they're showing negative mood more often, and more likely um, to have a perceived social rejection than their securely attached counterparts. Perceived social rejection just means that you believe that others are rejecting you, even if they're not. You take things as rejection often. If I had to sum up the anxious attachment style, I'd say that they're very clingy and very dependent on others. Okay, let's go on. Uh, in the rest of this section, we're going to talk about love and close relationships, the faces of love. Okay. And we'll start with talking about intimacy on the slide. Uh, we can define it as as self disclosure and the sharing of private thoughts. You know, you're intimate with them. You share secrets and you know your innermost ideas and thoughts. Okay. Erickson believed that intimacy was the major crisis or major goal of the stage. I mean, to develop intimacy with another one, with another. If you don't manage that, you may end up being isolated for the remainder of your life. We believe, remember this is the early adult years, so 20s and 30s. I mean, certainly this is the time that you should have some intimate relationships with others. And then if you were to wait till your 40s or 50s, middle-aged years, and start it at that point, you would probably appear so awkward to anyone else that had been in relationships before. You'd be a beginner or novice at a time when no one's looking for that. So this is the time when most people are novices in intimate relationships that it is a time to explore and then become comfortable with them. Uh, I kind of like this. This is like a greeting card kind of line here, but apparently this is from Erickson. Intimacy is finding oneself while losing oneself in another person. Isn't that sweet? Okay, you. I do actually like it. You're finding yourself while at the same time losing yourself in another person. I mean, I think with real intimacy, I mean, you do learn about yourself when you can share things, deep things about yourself with another. You are that is what allows you to learn more about yourself, and they can help you with their reactions and reflections. But it's you kind of digging inside of yourself that allows you to learn about yourself. So you're finding yourself as you express your innermost pieces with another, and then at the same time, you're losing yourself in them, and they are learning about who you really are. And okay, failure to achieve intimacy results in social isolation. And okay, intimacy and independence. This this is the stage where you're looking for a balance. I mean, on the one hand, you have intimacy and commitment, so which is being with another. On the other hand, you have independence and freedom. I mean, we value both sides of this. We want to be intimate and committed to others. We also like our independence and our freedom. No one wants to lose that. And so these things can kind of rub against each other, wanting to be with another, but also wanting independence and freedom. I mean, and so it is a balancing act. How can I feel connected and intimate with another and yet still feel like I'm free and independent? Uh, According to Erickson, finding the right balance is part of the central task of adulthood, finding the balance between these kind of opposing ideas. Romantic love. Um, so romantic love, also known as passionate love or eros, has strong components of sexuality and infatuation. It may include jealousy as well. It often predominates in the early part of love relationships. So romantic love, I mean, you probably most of you know what it's like in the early part of a relationship, and there's a lot of sexuality and just being infatuated with the person. Once again, I mean, I think jealousy is more easily rears its head in early parts of relationships as well. So this is, at least in our society, this is what characterizes early relationships. It's our deciding point of who we want to spend time with and stay with. We marry for love in this country. Not every society does that. Some societies, the love comes later. They marry, they have arranged marriages or something like that, where the love grows. In our society, kind of like the love kind of at its highest when you decide to be with somebody early in the relationship, and then it tends to kind of diminish somewhat as the relationship gets older. Um, Anyways, okay, that's romantic love. Affectionate love is also known as companionate love. Desires to have another person near. It's based on a deep and caring affection for that person. This is more about intimacy and sharing. Kind of what I was talking about on the previous screen with um, losing yourself in another and being able to share who you are with them. This is more about what affectionate or companionate love is. And then we have consummate love, the strongest form of love. It involves dimensions of passion, intimacy, and commitment. And this idea brings us to Sternberg's triangular theory of love. And he's the one that introduced this term of consummate love. And if we take a quick look at his theory here, triangle theory of love, there are three major components that are important in relationships: passion, intimacy, and commitment. Let me define those real quick. A passion is physical and sexual attraction to another. You know what like I was talking about in the previous slide when I was talking about romantic love. It's passion is the attraction you feel early in a relationship. Um, Intimacy, warmth, closeness, and sharing. So this is when I was talking about affectionate love, and I'm talking about sharing yourself with another. And so intimacy, you're sharing and closeness with another. Commitment is the cognitive appraisal of the relationship and the intent to maintain the relationship even in the face of problems. Cognitive appraisal means it's a thinking component. Commitment does come apart by thinking. I mean, passion is certainly a feeling that you have. We know that passion is an emotion. Intimacy, that sense of closeness, it's partially cognitive, but it's also partially a feeling. I mean, there's a nice feeling to be with a companion, with somebody that you're close to. But when we speak about commitment, it's kind of like it's much more cognitive. It's think about am I sticking this relationship out? Do I have are my plans, my future plans that I've considered, do they involve this relationship going on and on? And so it was a cognitive appraisal, and the second part of that the definition was the intent to maintain the relationship even in the face of problems, and that's really obviously what commitment is. That you have the intention to stick it out. Anyway, so we have the three major components, and they're listed here, and based on the combination of these three components that are present, that are like highly present in a relationship, you get different types of love. So you can see in this chart here, I mean, if you look at infatuation, it only has one component, just passion, with no real intimacy or commitment. I'm going to go through these again on the next slide, but affectionate love, you can see, has two components. Fascist love has two components. And then you get that idea of consummate love, which, once again, it's the what Sternberg described as being the fullest form of love. Let me go to the next slide. We have them all listed here. So consummate love is the strongest, fullest form. It has passion, intimacy, and commitment. I mean, you can't really ask for more. You're still passionate. You're like your best friend, and you're committed together. I mean, this is what a wonderful, ideal relationship is. Infatuation. Remember, that's just one component, passion. There's no intimacy or commitment. This would be like an affair or a fling that you have. Maybe it's a summer fling, and you know it's not going anywhere, so there's no commitment. And if it's just this kind of sexual fling, there's not a lot of intimacy. You're not sharing your deepest secrets with this person, but a lot of passion. So a sexual fling is appropriate for that. Affectionate love, combination of intimacy and commitment, but no or little passion. Intimacy takes time. So this is not a new relationship. I mean, affectionate love, for affectionate love, it's typically a couple that's been together for a while, and they've developed intimacy over time. And if they're committed, I mean, it gives the relationship a solid basis. But perhaps the passion has died out. So an example of affectionate love would be, couples who have been married for many years. And it's very typical that relationships go like this. The passion dwindles over the years, but the intimacy and commitment tend to increase. And finally, we have fascist love, passion and commitment without intimacy. This would be, I mean, this is kind of an interesting combination. And it would be one example that the book mentions is as one when one person worships another from a distance. So you worship somebody from a distance. There's no intimacy because you're not spending time together. Actually, you're not really sharing a lot. But if you worship that person, you're committed to them, and you have passion. You feel passion um, towards them, even if it's not being acted upon. So this might be like you love your friend's spouse, let's say. I mean, for as an example, I mean, you feel passionate towards them, and you feel you have this commitment if it's a real love, but you're not together. There's no intimacy, or it could be a stalking. You know, passionate love also comes about like somebody stalking a celebrity or something. They feel passion towards that celebrity. They're committed to that celebrity. They've been following them for years, but there's no real intimacy because they have no time together. Okay, that's an interesting one. Let's go on. So that concludes the first two sections of chapter 12. We just briefly covered stability and change from childhood to adulthood, and then we looked at love and close relationships. And that concludes the first video.